Without clear, well-designed figures, your research loses impact. No matter how impactful, how great your research data is, poor graphics, poor visualizations will ruin your reputation as a researcher. Now, I've spent about 10 years of producing and reviewing technical engineering documentations. And I've come across through 4 big mistakes that even the big, major, talented researchers do. So my goal in this video is to show you how to avoid these 4 mistakes. So let's start with mistake number 1. And this is tiny font sizes. This is the most typical mistake that you see everywhere in almost any conference paper. So with this example, you can see that we have a chart and we have the core text of the article. And you see that the font is really, really small. Compare it to the main paragraph font. You can see here distance from the first tower is about half of the size of the figure caption and about half of the size of the core body of the research article. Now, you don't want this. You want your viewers to immediately recognize your data and the patterns. So what do you do instead? Well, this is the improved version. You increase the font size. And my recommendation is always stick to the same font family throughout the entire article. For instance, for your paragraphs, but also for the figures. See, for example, here, the label on the x-axis has the same font size, the same font type than the figure caption and than that on the paragraph of the text. And this is much more legible, much more fluid while reading. Let us compare back again, previous example, and then now with the proper font size. Let us see a second example of this first mistake. This is a different figure taken from a published article. So you see here in this map, in this diagram, the fonts are barely recognizable. The text is barely recognizable. So this is a problem of proper resolution of the image, but also of the proper font selection. You can see if you compare this font to the main paragraph, it's a completely mismatch. So let us see the improved version. Now you see it. Now the characters of the figure have the same size as the paragraph. This makes it more fluid, more relaxed through your eyes. And this is ultimately what we want. We want to make it easy to the reader to recognize what our message is. So in this case, I've got the same font size and it matches very, very nicely. I've also added some colors and the message is way more fluent. Very good. Now let's move to the second mistake with another example. And the second mistake is very, very typical as well. It's overcrowded layouts. Essentially, you're putting too much information on your figures. Although this might look like you have a very clear understanding of what you're presenting, ultimately what you care should be what message is that you are delivering to the audience. And the message is given with one sentence, no more, no more. So in this figure, you see tons of data, right? You see 2 curves, which is okay, but you see multiple points throughout the curve with description. Sometimes the text comes in front of the lines, which makes it really hard to read and to recognize what is being explained there, but ultimately is too much information. If you see this, you cannot grasp the main ideas in one take. So what to do instead? You want to be really specific and selective on the information that you want to present in your figures. And all the rest goes either through the text or in the appendices or in an additional included file, such as an Excel table, etc., a database, etc. So this is the improved version. So I've eliminated roughly about 80% of the previous legends. You see here, previously we had so many different spots, different values, different curves. I just removed this and I'm left here with one curve for the weight distribution and another curve for the derivative weight in this case. And I've got 5 annotations, just 5, showcasing what I think is the most important, are the most important elements of this chart. And in this case, it's just an example. I've selected the start of the chemical process, 3 stages marked as 1, 2, and 3, which will be explained in the text or in the caption, a final spot, and then one annotation to signal this 37% decay, right? So I want to keep it clean, and if a reader sees this chart, he or she is able to immediately identify the 3 major stages, right? So this is what we want. We want to deliver the proper information. We want to be selective with the information we are showing. Let's go to the second example. So this is a chart from controls engineering showcasing a very complex control process, right? And in this case, you might feel a bit overwhelmed by the many boxes, many types of fonts, and the curved lines. So what I've done in the second, or in this case, is to align the boxes a little bit better. Some of the text boxes, I've summarized them in just acronyms. For instance, you can see here FSMSO, although it's already very long. I've tried to squeeze it a little bit. I've included colors to showcase the hierarchies of the information that I'm showing. So for instance, purple corresponds to processes, green corresponds to decision points, etc. So what I've tried to do here is to declutter the image. So that is mistake number 2. Try to remove clutter as much as possible and try to be precise and concise with the message that you're trying to deliver. Let us go now to mistake number 3. And this is poor color choices or improper selection or distinguish or differentiation between different information types. Now, what do I mean by this? Let us see this example. We have 3 lines: reflected pressure, incident pressure, and dynamic pressure. The whole chart is colored in black, but we also have auxiliary lines, as you can see these here, these horizontal and vertical auxiliary lines. And that makes it really hard to the reader to quickly distinguish between line series, I mean pressure, incident pressure, dynamic pressure, and these supportive or auxiliary lines. So what you want to do instead is guide the reader as much as you can through the proper information hierarchies that you want to display. So let us see a better example. So I've included now colors because nowadays you can almost always use colors. So I've included 3 colors which have very proper contrasts between them, and the auxiliary lines are all black and dashed. So this makes it really clear when do we have a pattern in the chart, when do we have a line series, and when do we want to annotate or show specific points of the graph, such with these auxiliary lines. Notice as well that I've also decluttered the image a little bit. If I go back, you see these long texts for every location: peak dynamic pressure, peak incident pressure, and so forth. I've eliminated them, and I'm assuming I'm going to explain this in the text of my paper, of my assignment, of my thesis. So this is an example of how to use colors properly. Let us see another example for this mistake. Here we have a robotic arm. Now this is perfectly fine if you have enough time to investigate this image and try to understand what does each letter mean. right? But in this variation, what I've tried to do is use color strategically to signal different types of information. So you see here, purple corresponds to coordinate systems, and gray corresponds to lengths or distances of the robotic assembly. So this is an example of how you can use colors to distinguish between different information sources, different information hierarchies, different domains. Now let's move on to the fourth mistake. And this one is missing visual guidance. So very commonly, well, you can see here, first of all, that the author has scaled very badly the chart, right? You see that the numbers appear squeezed on the top. This is, of course, something you want to avoid, but overall, what is missing in this chart is some sort of visual guidance to show the reader how to quickly read through the scales, read through the axis of any point on the chart. And this is very easily corrected with a grid line or a background grid line. Now, this is not mandatory. Sometimes the charts work really well without any background grid. But most of the times, I would recommend to select a very subtle background grid. Why is this case? Because it allows the reader to quickly identify orders of magnitude. So in the previous example, if I just look at these 2 points here, this one and this one, I cannot identify very, very rapidly what is the distance, the vertical distance between these 2 points. But once I add background grids, I can very easily identify that between this number and this one, this point, I've got about half a unit of the Nusselt number, right? So this is another example of how you can use background grids and keep and assist your readers to understand your charts. Now, on to the second example. This is the opposite, right? We have a very dense background grid. On top of that, we also have a squeezed vertical axis, meaning that the author probably squeezed or scaled, stretched the image once it was copied, which is something we also want to avoid. But as you can see in this case, you cannot quickly identify, for instance, the distance between the top point and the middle point, or the first point. You could do this, of course, if you go back through the axis and then you go back through the vertical axis in the second point and then subtract. But what we want to do is help the reader as much as possible, always. So in this chart, we've got 2 background grids. We have a major background grid covering these 100 degrees Celsius, and also we have a minor grid where we have 4 divisions. That means 25 degrees. So in this chart, if your audience sees this chart and wants to look at the top and the bottom, the reader can easily count 3 blocks by 100 degrees. That means 300 degrees difference, right? Just from reading through these lines. And this is what distinguishes average diagrams with excellent, proper journal quality diagrams. I've also added annotations. With these annotations, the reader can easily check simple dimensions, simple, quick orders of magnitude of the phenomena that you want to present. So for instance, in this case, very rapidly you can notice that the peak temperature of the heat treatment was 411 degrees C. You can also notice the time of the peak, and I've also added a heating rate, also to signal some major key points of the chart. So this is also you want to create, to put into your charts to assist the audience on understanding what the message is. So this concludes the video. I hope these 4 mistakes have helped you identify key issues in your charts, and now it's time to putting it into practice.